And we should be live. Happy Hanukkah to the wonderful dear Lesléa Newman.
And happy Hanukkah to you, dear Mel.
So we're celebrating. First of all, we're celebrating our friendship. We're celebrating Hanukkah with a Hanukkah book. So here in Israel, we're about to light the second light of Hanukkah, and there in the States, it's morning. This evening, you will light the second light of Hanukkah, and you have a unique book out since the summer, and a few words about it, and then we'll talk about Hanukkah and life and writing and everything else.
So, my book is called simply Hanukkah, and it is a part of a series of books about different holidays. And so, Quattro Books asked me to write this book, and it's really a combination of fiction and nonfiction. Fiction in terms of that I created a family, and the book is narrated by Lior, which means my light. And he basically takes the reader by the hand and leads them into Hanukkah and how it's celebrated, why it's celebrated, what his family does in particular. And really, if you know nothing about Hanukkah, you will know a lot about Hanukkah by the time you finish this book. And if
You'll
you
know,
do know
you'll
something,
know, you'll know everything about Hanukkah. This is the most exhaustive children's book on Hanukkah that I've ever seen.
and there's a lot of really fun fact matter. So there's recipes, there's a history lesson, there's a quiz. That was my favorite thing to write. And yeah, it's pretty complete. I have to say so myself.
I mean, there's even a recipe. I mean, Mela, there's a recipe for latkes. Uh, you're not the first Hanukkah book to have a recipe for latkes, but recipe for applesauce. That is special. So tell me about it's illustrated by Rotem Teplow, who's a famous illustrator here in Israel. And the Quarto, a few words about the publisher and about Elizabeth Harding, your agent. It's a village. Talk about your village.
I am so lucky and so blessed to have so many smart, creative, supportive, intelligent, kind people on my team. I really feel so blessed. So I've worked with my agent for 25 years. So we've been through a lot together, a lot of books and a lot of life. And Alice Hobbs, who unfortunately for me, is no longer with Quattro. She's moved on to something else, and wherever she is, they are lucky to have her. She approached me and she told me that they were doing this series and she wanted me to do the Hanukkah book. And when she told me that Rotem was going to illustrate the book, I just thought, oh my goodness, that was the sour cream on the latke, instead of the icing on the cake. That was just fabulous.
Or the jelly in the sufganiya.
Yes.
So since we talked about Rotem, she's an award-winning illustrator here. Now's a good time to whip out the book and to show us some of the spreads, maybe to read us a
Well,
little bit.
sure. So the cover. I love the cover. It's beautiful. There is the Hanukkah in the window with the children looking at it. And of course, there is a dog. Let me see if I can find the dog. Oh, here, the dog is helping Lior,
Yeah.
is making homemade Hanukkah gifts for his family and friends.
Does the dog know
And
does the dog know that it's a Jewish dog? Does it know that
well, the
it's in a
dog's name
children's book?
dog's name is Tootsie. So to me, that's a very Jewish name. And here is a wonderful spread of and friends around the table enjoying a holiday meal.
Wonderful.
So yeah, so
Including the neighbors who come over with sufganiyot.
yes, and the Lior's aunts, which they are a two-mom family with a baby, and the neighbor is a single dad with his daughter. So I really wanted to show diversity in the book. That's kind of one of my trademarks. And Rotem's illustrations show diversity as well. So there you have it.
Can you read a little bit of it?
I can read a little bit for sure. My name is Lior, which is a Hebrew name that means my light. Hanukkah is the Jewish festival of lights, and it's my very favorite holiday. Hanukkah starts after sunset on the 25th day of the Hebrew month of Kislev and lasts for 8 days. I can't wait to celebrate with my family and friends. That's
Wonderful.
the very start of the book. And then we go on from there.
So, a few words about you. I mean, you've been on the show before. You have an amazing career, and you are an incredible person and mentor. I'll just mention that we met this summer at the PJ Highlights Week, and you taught me a class that was so moving that I left in the middle and actually wrote a manuscript. So you're one of my heroes, Lesléa. Talk about everything. Talk about the process. Talk about how you write a book on Hanukkah. Is this your favorite Jewish holiday? Um, did you do research? Did you think about when you were a kid? Um, even though it's like expository and it's like in between fiction and nonfiction, but there's still this element. How am I going to tell it? First person, second person, third person, from the voice of the dog. You've chosen a small boy. Um, I'm going to shut up.
Well, I have to admit that my favorite holiday really is Pesach. So I love Hanukkah, of course. Who doesn't? Who doesn't love a good latke and a good soup goniot? Um, so several books about Passover, and I've written other books about Hanukkah. So this is not my first, but I did, of course, think about my own family traditions. The applesauce recipe that you mentioned before was taught to me by my grandmother. And, recipe is wide open to interpretation because she never wrote anything down. She never measured anything. So she taught me really how to cook the few things I cook. I'm not a great cook. I'll be the first to admit that. But my applesauce is actually very famous in these parts. People beg for it. Um, so it's a matter of taste.
You're like
So,
the Johnny Appleseed of applesauce.
I am. I love that. So, I thought about how we celebrated Hanukkah when I was a kid and how I celebrate Hanukkah now with my family of choice. I thought about what are the really important things that a reader, the reader I had in mind was somebody who didn't know anything about Hanukkah. So, are those things that that person would need to know? But most importantly, I wanted the book to be very Hamish. I wanted to infuse the book with love and joy and celebration of our heritage and our holiday. So, and the
Hamish,
fact that we're still
Hamish.
here.
Not everybody knows the word Hamish. Mostly Jews who speak Yiddish and people in New York who don't speak Yiddish. Hamish would mean not homely, but homish.
Yeah,
Home
definitely not homely.
homebody-ish.
Yeah, cozy,
Cozy,
warm,
cozy,
friendly. Yeah.
snuggly. It's a very snuggly book. And what's with the kugel? I mean, kugel is not a traditional Hanukkah dish, and the grandparents bring a kugel, a noodle kugel, right?
Yes. So,
Is that a special Newman tradition or something? What am I missing here?
I do love kugel, I must admit, which usually I eat to break the fast on Yom Kippur. But everybody wanted to contribute their own signature dish, and I wanted the book to be um, user friendly to all. So I didn't want to put in, for example, chicken soup because a lot of people don't eat meat, right? So that's why I was thinking, well, of course, somebody's going to make latkes, somebody's going to bring soup oat, somebody would probably bring a salad, though greens were not big in my family. But I just thought, well, what other delicious condition? This time of year, I feel like it's the festival of light, of course, but it's also the festival of carbs, right? We eat so many carbs during the last week and a half of the year, so I had someone bring a kugel.
That's great. And so here's another thing. I'm used to your books, which are fiction, and your wonderful books of poetry. And here you have a chore, not a chore, a kind of a what's the word in English? A mesima, a
An assignment.
assignment. Thank you. How do you do the assignment, and yet your voice creeps in while you're writing something for a publisher on a subject, and you have to bring everything together, all the food and the family and the diversity and yada yada. Where's Lesléa here?
So for me, the key that unlocks the door to any book is voice. And for this book, as soon as I came up with the name Lior, which means my light, which of course Hanukkah is the festival of light, and we light them in our, so it all came together actually through that name. Then I started writing in Lior's voice. And then it was really fun to name all the other characters, especially the dog, Tootsie. Um, the voice just emerged, I would say. It's
Yeah, but
not
okay,
something
but
that you can force.
why a boy? Why not
You know,
Leora? I mean, everybody says, well, hold on. Everybody says there aren't enough books about girls. My book has a girl hero, and your book has Davka, a boy.
well, that's a good question. And writing it's a funny thing. It's not, I often don't feel like I'm choosing the words. The words are choosing me, and I just kind of run after them to get them down on paper. And so Lior's name and voice came to me in a very strong way. So I just had to follow that. I do have to say that a forthcoming book of mine, which is called Something Sweet, a Sitting Shiva story, centers on a girl named Lizzie. And Lizzie's best friend, Joshua's grandfather, has died, and Lizzie and her mom go to pay a Shiva call, and the book is told in the voice of Lizzie. So there is
I,
the
I,
same kind
I,
of
I
thing.
Leslie, I
It,
think that when the paper talks to you, that's the best possible answer.
yes,
You don't have to be apologetic for that. If the paper says to you, listen, the story has to be told in this person, in this environment, and the heroes, and then you just take your pencil and put it on the paper. I don't think it gets better than that. And here's my next question for you. Um, this is a very difficult time for Jewish people. And while there's many people in the States who are hiding their mezuzot and putting their Magen David in their sweaters, you're out there with a book that's blatantly Jewish, blatantly about a Jewish holiday, and so proud of being Jewish, and so proud of celebrating. And of course, I'm all in favor of it. But how do you feel about this?
well, it's definitely a tough time. One of the first things I did after October 7th, 2023 was, I don't know if you can see it, but I have this ring, which is a Jewish star. And I felt like I really wanted to be very clear of who I am. And also, I feel I have something on my body that for me is a sign of protection. So I wear my star. Sometimes I also wear a necklace. Not always. I have neck issues from a car accident. So that's why the ring was very important to me. Um, but I just feel really personally important to be fully who I am, and by extension to spread joy about being Jewish, which is what I do with my children's books. Because that's what our kids deserve and need and are manifesting, and I want to stand with them in that. So that is why, for me, my task of tikkun olam, or repairing the world, is to write children's books so that children who are Jewish can see themselves and as a mirror, and children who are not Jewish can look into the window of our lives and learn about us. And hopefully, we can create a world where everyone feels like they have a place to belong.
That's wonderful. In our previous conversation, we talked about the joyful song, which is another Jewish tradition of naming the babies, and a few words I've interviewed you about your life, but a few words of what makes Lesléa Newman you. A few
What makes
landmark
me me?
things.
Well, my name, Lesléa, which is unique and which I chose for myself when I was 16 and had it legally changed. So I would say that would be one thing. My 36 double high year marriage to my beloved spouse, my love of animals, and doing what I can to protect animals and keep them safe. Being a poet, of course, that is my one of my primary identities. I think of myself, of course, as a writer and an author, but my background is and my first love is poetry. And my mentor was Allen Ginsberg. My love of chocolate, my legendary love of chocolate. Um,
I love that.
so
And so
many things.
this is one of the Lesléa moments in this book. Is the Bobe wins all of the chocolate coins
She
or
does.
in the dreidel contest, and then she donates them because who doesn't love
So
chocolate?
yes. So what happens is you can see that she's very pleased that she has won. So she gets all the chocolate coins or gelt. And then on the next page, Bubby smiles. Who can eat this much chocolate? She asks, looking at the big pile of gelt in front of her. Not me. Besides, she adds, chocolate tastes better when it's shared. She passes out pieces of gelt to everyone.
That's so beautiful. Chocolate tastes better when it's shared. I'm not sure I ascribe to that belief, but it's very well. It's very lyrical. I mean, chocolate tastes better when it's shared with me.
Well,
Go ahead.
my
Yes.
spouse, my spouse would be laughing at this because she would say, "It's a lie. She's not really good at sharing her chocolate."
What is your
But I do
favorite? What
sometimes.
is your favorite chocolate? So I'll bring you some next time I see you.
Well, dark chocolate for sure. With or without nuts. No, like jelly, no fruity stuff, really. No.
No.
So nuts are fine and no caramel. But
And
really,
okay.
you go wrong with just like pure dark chocolate, just a solid piece.
Okay. So everybody who's listening, remember that the road to Leslia's heart is dark chocolate, with or
That
without
is
nuts.
true. And I just have to say that it was my grandmother's tradition to eat a tiny little piece of chocolate every night. And she would say, life shouldn't be bitter. Have something sweet.
That's wonderful. Let's segue now to the book that's coming out. The
Something
sweet,
sweet.
something sweet about a Shiva. When is that coming out? Who's publishing it? How does that work? Another book about Jewish tradition.
Yes. So it is called Something Sweet, a Sitting Shiva story. And so the book is narrated by Lizzie, who is a friend of Joshua's. Joshua's grandfather has just died, and Lizzie and her mom actually they bake brownies and bring them to the house of Shiva, where and Lizzie has never paid a Shiva call before, so she and through her the reader learn what that's about, what the traditions are, and Joshua's grandfather is based on my beloved Uncle Terry who so some during the Shiva, Joshua and his family remember their beloved family member who has just died, and some of those memories are based on things that my uncle Terry has done and said. And so I love that I'm bringing him back to life through the pages of this book.
Wow, incredible. And when is that published in by
Oh,
whom?
it's going to be published by Charles Bridge, and it's coming out in February of 2026. Um, tw I 2025 is the first year since 1986 that I believe I will not have a book published. And that is because of various illustrator schedules. But in 2026, I have four books coming out.
Amazing.
Yeah. And I have another Jewish book coming out called Song of the Dead Sea Scrolls. And it takes place in Israel, of course. And my inspiration came from my PJ Library trip to Israel in 2018, where we visited the museum and looked at actual pieces of the Dead Sea Scrolls and learned all about them. And that inspired me to write this picture book that's told in the voice of the scrolls as they are in the caves waiting to be discovered. And Enchanted Lion is publishing that book, and I'm very excited about it.
That's very exciting. So the book, this book that we're talking about today, published by Quarto this summer, how's it going? What's the feedback? Are people rightfully buying it and loving it?
I have heard from many people who have gotten it as presents and or have bought it as presents, and that's wonderful when somebody either gives or receives a book that I wrote, because that there's love in that exchange. So that makes me really, really happy.
And Leslie, you've written so many books. Like your bookcase behind you is for real.
Yes,
It's
it is.
what do you have a favorite? Is there such a thing as a favorite book? I know all of the books are like our children, yada yada yada. You have a favorite one?
So, my stock answer to that question is my favorite book is the one that I haven't written yet. However,
That's the
I
stock
also will,
answer of most people, right? I'm not
I
going
will,
to get away with that.
okay, so I will say that this is my left shoulder, and above my right shoulder in the corners, you'll see I Carry My Mother and I Wish My Father, which are books of poetry. They're actually, each one is a memoir in verse, and they are about my parents, the end of each of my parents' life in turn, their journey and my journey with them, because I was the primary caretaker for first my mom and then for my dad. So those books, of course, are very, very close to my heart.
Okay, and I love them. I'm lucky to have both of them. And you were featured on my wife's um, poetry program, and I love those. But we're talking now about children's stories. So again, I'm going to go back to the original question. I'm going to modify it, qualify it.
Hmm.
Among the children's books, Leslie, do you have a favorite?
Well, I have different favorites for different reasons. How about that? Okay, so for example, the Babka sisters. I love language of that book and how I got to play with the characters Hester and Lester and Esther and Chester. That was really, really fun to write. Um, I love Quetzal the cat who composed, because I am a cat person. And I love Joyful Song
And
because of
that's a
the
PJ.
artwork.
One
That,
second. The Quetzal the Cat who composed is a PJ Library selection, if I'm not mistaken.
as is the Babka sisters,
Yeah, the Babka
as
Sisters is a classic Jewish book. Quetzal, the cat who composed, is really wonderful in the sense that it's not about a holiday or whatever. It's a real true based on a true story.
yes, it's based on the true story of a composer who lived with a cat. And one day the cat leapt onto the keyboard of the composer's piano and went down. And the composer had this moment of kavanah, of intention. He heard this, transcribed it, sent it into a contest. And I love this, that he attributed the composer as Quetzal. And then when the composition won an honorable mention and was played in a concert by a young girl, I mean, the story just gets better and better. The true story. Um, the composer brings the cat, sneaks the cat into the concert hall, and when the composition is announced, this is all true. This is by Quetzal Cotel. Quetzal meowed, and then of course you're not supposed to have a cat in a concert hall, and things, chaos ensued in a wonderful way. So this was a children's book just waiting to happen.
So that brings me to my next question. We always ask ourselves where the ideas come from. In the case of our present conversation about the Hanukkah book, it came from a request from a publisher, but usually we have to come up with the ideas on our own. Do you have a special process? Can you retrace your steps? Say, oh, that's a wonderful idea. If I could figure out how I did that, I'd have a wonderful idea every hour or two.
So this is the hardest part of writing for me, is coming up with an idea. And when I say that, people kind of scoff at me because, I have written so many books. Once I get an idea, I really play with it and pester it really for, days, weeks, months, sometimes years, until I get it right. And that's my favorite thing. Once I have the idea, once I have a first draft, because as I tell my students, you cannot revise a blank piece of paper. So I can look at these books, and if you want me to, I can do this and tell you where the ideas came from some for some of them. But if I could just sit down and make an idea happen, I would be a much happier person. I like there was a writer whose name I always forget. Someone out there listening could probably knows, who said that his process was that he stares at a blank piece of paper until 3 drops of blood appear on his forehead. And that is kind of my process.
Who said
But
that?
when it went, I have to look it up. I
Mhm.
should know because I quote him so often. Um, when I don't know what to say, when I finish a project, and sometimes I write past the end just to stall being between projects. Um, I read a lot. I read poetry a lot. I just kind of scribble, free writing, starting with something like, I don't know what to write now. And I'm panicked because I don't have an idea. What should I do? Don't let the pen stop. I just like dribble, kvetching on paper, I call that. So I do that. Yep. I still write with a pen. Um, but I can tell you, for example, Mel, you said that Hanukkah was an idea that was given to, it was a request. So there was an idea. Joyful Song was inspired when I went to shul one day. A two-mom family brought their week-old baby daughter up on the bima to be blessed by the rabbi and to announce her name to the congregation and the community. So that moved me so deeply, I decided to write a book about it.
We've talked
So
about that book. It's a gorgeous book.
yeah,
It's a wonderful, award-winning book. Babka Sisters. Where did the
back.
idea for Babka Sisters come
So, that book I wrote, I came again when I came back from Israel, uh, with which I went to with the PJ Library. I was just kind of writing in my notebook one day, and the word babka is just a fun word, right? So
from?
I
Yeah.
just kept thinking I should write something about babka, and then I have really, frankly, no idea where the sisters Esther and Hester came from. But
And
then
Pester and
I love,
Chester.
yeah, so I love that their names
And
rhyme.
and Fester and Lester.
So then Chester and Lester are their pets. And then when their neighbor Sylvester showed up, I thought, okay, now I'm really onto something. And so then I started playing with language. One of the sisters cuts a piece, the other one slices, one of them offers, one of them serves. So it's really a book about language. And that was really fun because I love language. So that's kind of how that started. Where the idea came from, I don't know. But looking behind me, I can tell you that welcoming Elijah came because somebody I knew told me that once during a Seder, when they opened the door for Elijah, a cat came in. And I thought, well, isn't that wonderful? So it's a lot of things, a lot of experiences, a lot of drawing from
It-
real life.
it's identifying something that you otherwise would miss during your
Yeah, and
normal activities.
and it's something that has to delight me, because I know whatever it is, I'm going to be spending a lot of time on it, right? Because I'm going to be teasing out a story. I'm going to be crafting the language. I'm going to be doing at least 20 drafts of this picture book. So something has to delight me because I'm going to be spending so much time there.
I'm going to go back now to your wonderful book about Hanukkah. I will tell you why somebody like me cannot write that kind of book. And it's because of the back matter, Leslia. There's so much wonderful back matter there. I mean, half of Judaism is in your back matter. Why the holiday begins in the evening? Why it's never Hanukkah never starts exactly on the same sun calendar day. Um, so many things that people should know, but there's so much work in this, so much fact checking. The Jews say, "Oy vey, I could never do it." How do you do it?
Actually, I I love back matter. I love research. I love finding source material. And then, figuring out, coming up with the recipe. My favorite thing, I think, is the edible menorah, which was just so much fun to think about. It's crackers and
Show,
cream
show
cheese
us,
and
show us, show us.
yeah.
Ah,
So here it
you invented that?
well, I'm sure there are other people who have made edible menorahs. I've also made an edible Torah, which is not in this book, but it's in my book. Whoops, Here is the World, the Year of Jewish Holidays. So we have crackers, we have squares of cream cheese, we have pretzel sticks, and we have mini marshmallows. So And a big note here in bold that says,
Mini
do
kosher
not light
marshmallow.
this menorah.
Mini kosher marshmallows.
Kosher marshmallows. Thank you for that. But do not light this menorah in flames. It's to be eaten, not lit.
No, but
But
I
that
mean,
was really fun to come up with.
you can light the marshmallows and make a kind of s'more menorah, a
You
s'menorah.
know, a s'more menorah. I like it. I would be very careful lighting this menorah, and I would only advise adults to try it. But
Yeah,
really, it's not meant
kids,
to be lit.
kids, don't try this on your own.
Do not try this on home. So
Not a, it's not a science book.
I just got attacked by my own books. They
No,
fell. I'm going to put them back.
and
Thank.
one more before we leave this. And the spread of the Jewish months. My goodness, wow! Can you show
Well,
us?
learned a lot because it's very tricky. Because people are always saying to me things like, "Well, Hanukkah's so late this year," and I'm like, "It's not late; it's right on time, right?" It's different according to the sun calendar, but here is, our calendar is very different. It's a kind of a solar lunar calendar, and the holidays move around. There, many holidays always start on the full moon. And then instead of adding an extra day every 4 years, leap year, we add actually an extra month, right? Which is very
Hmm.
confusing. I'm still not sure that I understand it perfectly,
Hmm.
but I tried to explain it the best way that I could.
Okay, but I mean, it's so complicated that
It is
it,
complicated.
religious Jews understood calendars and the skies, and they could become great navigators back in the day when everybody else thought the world was flat. But
Right.
that's a whole nother story.
Yeah, that
Leslie,
could be another book.
a whole nother story. So let's now segue to your teaching. I'm going to give a little plug for you. You teach, you mentor, you offer critique services, and you have a special gift. What is your gift? I can tell you what I think it is, but I'm going to ask you.
Well, I learned that the word educate really comes from educare. Somebody told me that, and I thought, isn't that lovely? So I have to really care about my students and their work. Um, and it's not the kind of job where you can just kind of turn it off. Like I find myself thinking about my students' work, like over dinner or when I'm doing something else. Their manuscripts have to live inside me for a while, almost as if they were my own. But my job is not to get anyone ever to write more like me. My job is to get each writer to write more like themselves and to, every writer needs somebody who is not them, who can take a step back and to really point out what's working, what's magnificent, because there's always something that's working in a manuscript. And then to take a closer look at what could work better and to help the writer develop that. I think the best thing to do is to ask a lot of questions and to try not to be directive. So sometimes I feel like, oh, I really know how to solve this issue, but that's not my job. My job is to open the door so that the writer can step inside and solve the problem.
And you're able to do that, which is quite rare as an author who's also teaching. You know, when I have a critique manuscript come in from a buddy or a partner or whatever, I also have this thing, oh, gee, I think I know what the twist should be at the end. But I'm not able to hold myself back. And that's why I'm a lousy mentor. And you're able to. What is it about you that makes you able to not bring Lesléa into the picture, but let the students express themselves?
Well, there is such joy in watching a student grow as a writer. And I love many students have said to me, they'll write something and then they'll say, and I hear your voice in my head saying, do you really need that adverb or something like that? So I like that I've kind of infiltrated my students' brains. But it's like teach a person to fish as opposed to giving a person a fish, right? You want to, I mean, really job is to make myself obsolete so that my students don't need me, right? They're self-editing in a good way, not self-censoring, self-editing. There's a difference.
You had this great session this summer where we just, if I remember correctly, um, you just told us to observe what was going around and just write. To just look around and just write something. Not you didn't say write what. It was the most vague of prompts in the universe. Look around and write something.
Well, that comes from one of my favorite writers is Jack Kerouac, and I attended the Jack Kerouac School of Disembodied Poetics in Boulder, Colorado. It's part of Naropa. That's where I studied with Allen Ginsberg. And he would go with a notebook and a pen, and just like an artist might sketch what they see, he would sketch what he saw, heard, smelled, felt, tasted, words. And that's a really good practice. If you don't know what to write about, go somewhere and just sketch it out in words and see
And
what develops.
I've been waiting 5 months to ask you this question. So 15 minutes ago, you told me that sometimes you have trouble coming up with new ideas. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, she should do her own technique and go sit somewhere and look at things. So do you take your own medicine, Leslie?
Well, I have to say that mostly I write at home. I haven't done that in a long time, but this reminds me it would be a really good thing to do. But what I do when I get stuck is that I read a lot of like I'll read an entire book of poetry by one author, and then just start to write, inspired or influenced or moved by that writing, and see what comes out. And or I will just pick a form, any form. So I'll just say, you know what, I'm just going to write a sestina, which is very challenging. To me, it's a lot of fun. And that poem might not go anywhere, but it might lead to something else. But, the pen just has to keep moving. There's just something that organically develops when words appear on a page.
Mike Malbrough, who taught me for a while, great teacher, he also said, when you're stuck, read children's books, read picture books.
Hmm.
Don't copy them, but the same way that you listen to music, get ideas. If somebody's writing about a worm, then you can write about a caterpillar or or an apple. So this is very good advice. Any other pieces of advice you want to share? Actually, whether you want to or not, I'm asking you, but I know you want to because you're such a good person.
Well, before I do that, I just want to give you a little anecdote, which is that a student of mine actually sent me this wonderful picture book called Wishes. I don't know if you've seen it. It's about a refugee family and their journey across very harrowing conditions to safety. And there's very, very sparse text, and it's a beautiful, beautiful book. And I decided, or something within me decided, that I should write a response to that book from the other point of view. And so my book, which is coming out from Scholastic in 2026, is called Welcome, A Prayer for Refugees. And so it looks at the other side of what's happening. A family is escaping peril and coming to safety, and there's a family or a community here that is providing safety and welcoming a family or a child. And so that was a direct response to a picture book. So I just want to acknowledge your suggestion and say, yes, it's wonderful to read picture books for inspiration.
Yeah, it's Mike Malbrough that he deserves the credit. I mean, I'll take the credit,
Okay.
but I don't deserve it really.
Okay, so I'll tell you my favorite writing exercise, which I actually do on a regular basis. It's called
Okay.
I Remember, and it is based on Joe Brainerd's book, which is titled I Remember. And it was published, I believe, in the 1960s. And what happens is you write down the two words, I remember, and then you just write whatever comes next, but just like a sentence, you don't develop it. And then when that line is finished, you go back to I remember and you write another sentence. And it's like a meditation, right? It's like your mantra is I remember, and you just generate a list. And then when you have, let's say, at least 10 more, for me, usually like 20, 30, pick one and rewrite it, but not as a memory. rewrite it in present tense as if it is really happening in this moment, and put in as many sensory details as you possibly can, sight, sound, smell, textures, taste, and see what happens. And I have had stories come from that have been published. And sometimes, and you can mix it up in fun ways. You can add a word, like a verb is often good, like I remember throwing, I remember running, or you can add a word, I remember Bubby. So I've done all kinds of things with this exercise, and I find it really, really useful.
Wonderful. Leslie, so the last question, um, I just say that it might not be the last question,
Yeah.
is what happens if a student comes and gives you a manuscript and the subject matter you can tell is inappropriate, or there's something about the manuscript that cannot be fixed?
Hmm. Well, I think I would start with a lot of questions, such as what compelled you to write this story? Why is this story important to you? Who do you think the story is for? What is your intention of writing this story? And get a conversation going and see what transpires. And that could lead to some ideas. Um, not everything needs to be published. So, it's a little hard to answer this question because I would need something more specific. Um, but I would just work with that person
Well,
and just ask them questions.
it's a sticky wicket, you see, because they say that it's hard to publish books about death, and then you have your sweet Shiva book coming out.
Hmm.
So as teachers, mentors, or whatever, one really never knows what cannot be published, but you do have a sense. Um,
Right. So I would say two things. First of all, as a writer, is to write a book that can't not be published. Right. So you want an editor to run down the hallway and show this manuscript to whoever they need to show it to and say, I can't not publish this. You know, that's an okay time to have a double negative. I have to publish this. Right. And then the other thing I tell, or I ask my students, if they're having doubts or I'm having doubts, I say, if you knew that tomorrow you were going to ascend into the world to come joyfully, what book would you want to leave behind? And that's the book you should be working on.
so that's a different question. And we'll talk about that next time. Books
Okay.
that cannot not be written, as opposed to books that
Ah,
cannot not be published.
now that's a very good distinction. Yeah, yeah,
And
absolutely.
we'll talk about that next time. Leslie, is there anything that I haven't asked you? Is there anything you want to ask me? My medicine for regrowing hair is not working. Anything else you want to know?
No, I just adore you. I'm so happy to spend time with you.
It's a joy. But we've reached the end of our show, unfortunately. But in 2026, I'll have you back four times.
I look forward to that.
So, ladies and gentlemen, you have been enjoying, I hope you've been enjoying, the wonderful, wonderful Lesléa Newman, who has many new books out. We've talked about some of them, and today we talked about her Hanukkah book, which is called eponymously Hanukkah, and published by Quattro with the amazing illustrations of Rotem Teplow. I should have her on the show as well. And we'll shout out to Elizabeth Harding. Anybody else we should mention before we go?
Um, since we talked about this particular book, I think that's the crew. Oh, I would say Alice Hobbs, who was my editor, person who came to me with the project, and she was wonderful, wonderful, wonderful to work with.
So that's wonderful. Anybody named Alice has to be wonderful. Leslia, this was great. I wish you a Merry Hanukkah. Um,
And to you.
and to paraphrase a Jewish guy named Irving Berlin, whose name was Yisroel Balin, may all your Hanukkahs be bright.
Ah, thank you. Thank you.
It's been
And
great.
a joyful secular New Year
Absolutely.
towards into 2025. All good things.
And yes, and peace. We should have peace and a little bit of quiet, which I think we deserve.
That would
Um,
be a good thing.
Lesléa, it was great having you. Lesléa Newman, ladies and gentlemen, give it up. It's been wonderful. And I don't want to let you go, but I have to let you go. But we can talk another time.
We can hopefully before 2026.
Absolutely. So
Okay.
bye bye, dear. Chag Sameach.
Chag
Actually,
Sameach.
the religious Jews don't say Chag Sameach on Hanukkah. They say Chanukah Sameach.
Yes, which I think I wrote about in my book.
Absolutely. Bye bye, dear.
Bye.
Everybody run out and buy this book about Hanukkah, the amazing Jewish holiday written by the amazing Leslie Newman. Bye.